Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming today. And today is the third part of the discussion on how we can learn life lessons from the Mahabharata. And I'll do a quick recap of what we have discussed till now. In the first session, we discussed about this. Our broad outline that we're taking is that choices have consequences, and choices are determined by conditions and conditionings. So everything we're discussing in terms of this 4C framework. And in the first session, I discussed how life is unfair to everyone. Life is basically fairly unfair. So essentially, the first choice we'll have to make is, what do we focus on in life? So choices lead to consequences. So which choices do we face? And which choices do we act on? So the first choice is this one, choice one. What do we focus on? In how life is fair or how life is unfair? Then the second choice we discussed is that around us there will be good association and bad association. Whose influence do we take more seriously? By whom do we choose to get influenced by? So yesterday I discussed about how Duryodhan, yesterday session, I talked about this from two perspectives. Duryodhan, he could have chosen to focus on Vidura and Bhishma, but he focused more on Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra was also not very influential, he only was manipulated him, on Shakuni. So whose association do we take? That will be determined. So first aspect is that our life itself, in our life situation, do we have an attitude of, are we grateful or resentful? Are we grateful or resentful in terms of what is right in my life or what is wrong in my life? Then in terms of people, who the choice we'll make is, which people do we choose to be influenced by? So our life situation is one thing, then who are our influencers, to use today's language? Many people want to be influencers nowadays, but who are our influencers? So we also discussed about how Karna let himself be influenced by Duryodhan. Now, so that was, yesterday I talked only about the martial exhibition, where in that martial exhibition, Karna had his moment. Then, now in today's session, what we'll be discussing is, another choice we all have to make is, that what do we prioritize? That prioritize while decision making. That how do we make our decisions? And I'll talk about what I mean by this prioritizing. That we'll talk especially about the gambling match and who was thinking what at that time when the gambling match happened. So if we consider our life, what is the situation I have in life? What are the kind of people I have in my life? What is the association I have? And then what are the factors I consider? So broadly, whenever we are to make any decision in life, no, sometimes it says scripture is like a manual. But actually, it's a valid example, but it's not a very accurate example. Because manual simply indicates that you press this button and this will open. And you pull this lever and that will happen. Life is too complicated to ever have any manual. Scripture is more like a guidebook rather than manual. So, even in scripture itself, when we see characters have to make decisions, it is not that, okay, there is one ready-made shloka that they can quote and based on this make decisions. Even when there are shlokas to quote, there are different characters who may quote different shlokas. So ultimately, it is the individual responsibility to make decisions. So what factors do we consider while making decisions? So broadly, so our question is the question of dharma. So the choice of dharma, it is not just a moral choice. That this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. There is a lot of factors involved in deciding what is right and wrong. It begins with what do we focus on. So now whenever we do an action, there are three parts when we do an action. There is the content of the action. What exactly are we doing? There is the intent of the action. Why are we doing it? And then there is the effect of the action. So I often use the acronym ICE for this. So when we are about to make a decision, so these are three factors to be considered. So dharma is the right thing to do. To determine it, we should consider, okay, what was my intent in doing something? What did I actually do? And what was the result of what was done? Or what will be the result of what is to be done? So now, normally we may think that determining right and wrong is simply content. So for example, what does content mean? See, this is where scripture or tradition or law or culture, all these can play a part. Scripture, law, culture, tradition. Now, it doesn't mean that they always are right in these things, but what is right and what is wrong? This is decided to some extent for us. And by studying scripture, we can understand. Say for example, speaking truth is good. Speaking lies is bad. That's a straightforward point. But is it always that straightforward? Suppose we have a friend who is being targeted by some rioters. And that person comes and please save me. And we hide that person in our basement somewhere, that friend. And those rioters come and bang on our door. Is he here? Now, should we speak the truth at that time? What do you think? No, isn't it? At that time, while speaking lies is a bad thing, and we could say speaking truth is a good thing. But in that situation, we have to consider the effect of what I'm going to do. So basically, dharma, when we talk about dharma, or this is the principle of desha, kala, patra. Desha, kala means time, place, and patra is candidate. So generally speaking, dharma, in other words, dharma has many different meanings. One meaning of the word could be ethics. Ethics is about right things to do. There are two categories or two ways of understanding ethics. One is called categorical. Categorical is, this is the category of right and this is the category of wrong. And that is all there is to it. So it falls in this category, do this. If it falls in that category, do that. And that's all there is to it. So this is categorical ethics. So speaking truth is good, speaking lies is bad. That's all there is to it. The other ethics is contextual ethics. Contextual means what? We have to consider the context, the sandarbha. So contextual is not opposite to categorical, that there are still categories of right and wrong. There are still categories of things that are right and there are categories of wrong. But beyond that, there is what is often called the muddled middle. The middle is often a muddle. And this is where we'll have to consider the context to decide what is right and what is wrong. And we will see now with this analytical framework how different characters acted during the gambling match. What choices they took and why they took those choices, and what was the result of that. So broadly speaking, now while there are many characters involved, I'll focus on 3 characters. The main focus of course will be on Yudhishthir, but Yudhishthir, Bhishma and Karna. Now we will talk about other characters also, and I'll tell why we are going to focus on these 3 characters basically. See, generally speaking, we try to divide people into good people and bad people. And we expect that good people will do good things and bad people will do bad things. So now, sometimes it may happen that good people do bad things. Now sometimes it may also happen that bad people do good things. So that is when things become a bit more confusing. So for example, if we have people and actions. So the people are good and the actions are good. This is normally what we expect. Similarly, there are people who are bad and there are actions that are bad. So while anybody doing bad actions is not a good thing, but this is expected, we could say. So what I invite is expected. But sometimes what may happen is good people, let's put it in a different color. Sometimes good people may do bad things and sometimes bad people may do good things. And that's when the moral territory starts getting muddied. What is going on over here? Why are particular people acting in particular ways? And then how do we understand people also? So we know, if you know somebody is short-tempered and in a particular situation they get angry. Okay, we will also be prepared. When I'm going to tell this person is going to get angry and I should prepare for it, deal with it. But suppose somebody is a short-tempered person, we tell them something and they take it very calmly. You'll be surprised, oh, what happened? Has this person changed? Or how did this person stay so calm? Or somebody is normally a very peaceful person and we tell them something and they suddenly get enraged and start yelling and screaming and using foul words. See, what happened? What went wrong over here? So basically, in many ways, the character of people is seen when in the choices that they make. So with this broad background, let's try to understand what happened in the gambling match. So the Pandavas and the Kauravas, more or less after the Gurukul phase, went different ways. The Pandavas were sent to Varnavarth. Duryodhan with Shakuni tried to scheme in some ways, and they were becoming too popular, and he felt that if they are not in the city, then they cannot win people's hearts. And while I am here, and I will give gifts, I will do favors, and I will win people's hearts. So at this stage, the strategy seemed to be somewhat similar to the strategy that Kaikeyi had used with Ram. Now Kaikeyi had nothing against Ram per se. She just wanted Bharat to be the king. And Ram was in the way. So if Ram goes out of the kingdom, then what will happen? Bharat can show how good a king he is and he can win the citizens. And after that, even if he comes back, he won't be a threat. The citizens will already have accepted Bharat as a king. So that's why there was a straight finite period, 14 years of exile. So just as she wanted to sideline Ram, like that, it seemed that the Kauravas wanted to sideline the Pandavas. And the Pandavas accepted. Duryodhan pressurized Dhritarashtra. But when they went to Varnavarth, there was a whole plan. It was not to be sidelined, they wanted to be assassinated. The Pandavas expertly figured out what was happening. They planned, they dug a tunnel with some assistant that Vidura had provided them, and they escaped. Now in this situation, they decided that this was a far bigger conspiracy. When Bhima had been poisoned, it could have been just 1 or 2 people involved. But getting a person to go to a different kingdom and then have a palace built over there and have the palace made of inflammable material. No, this is not like a small time conspiracy. This is a big time conspiracy. But the Pandavas decided the danger is too much over here. So they decided not to go back to the kingdom. Now they couldn't have, earlier they had acted as if nothing had happened. But now they couldn't act like that. So they decided to keep a low profile. And they kept a low profile till opportunity presented themselves. And that happened in Draupadi Swayamvar. And in Draupadi Swayamvar, Arjuna won the hand of Draupadi. So yesterday I talked about this point that, for a person to succeed in life, there are three things required. It was the acronym TECH: talent, environment, and commitment. So this is based on Bhagavad Gita 18:14. Adhishthanam tatha karta karanam cha patak vida vividhasya patak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. So Arjuna had all these three, and Karna also had these three. That's how they became great archers. But just becoming a great archer is not good enough. You need some place where you can exhibit those skills. Like somebody might be a great cricket player, but unless they are selected in some state team or a national team, they'll just be playing some gully cricket. Isn't it? So now Karna got his big stage and his big opportunity, big break, when Duryodhan made him his friend and gave him Anga the kingdom. Now Arjuna similarly used his archery skills and he won the hand of Draupadi. Now in those times, you see, nowadays with respect to marriages, romance is so much overrated that sometimes romance becomes the sole purpose for developing relationships. And now marriages are nowadays more or less becoming the norm. But then, love as an emotion may not last all the time. So in the past, marriage was not just an option based on emotion. It was an obligation based on dedication. By obligation means what? That this is what we are expected to do. We have to have family, we raise children, we do our duty to ancestors. And quite often, marriages were not just a relationship between two people, they were also alliances between two families. And when Arjuna won the hand of Draupadi, at that time, the Pandavas' position changed. Now, they were no longer just orphan children who were fugitives. They were now the sons-in-law of a powerful rival king. And Dhritarashtra could no longer neglect them. Dhritarashtra called them back and he offered them half of the kingdom. But even a person with half a brain would understand that this was not half of the kingdom. Because it's like, say, if a parent has two companies and one company is flourishing and the other is completely going bankrupt. And a parent says, okay, I have two children, I'll give one company to each of you. Well, that's how it was. It was a complete wilderness that was given to the Pandavas, the Khandoprastha. But the Pandavas gracefully accepted it. And then, by Krishna's mercy and by their own hard work, they converted Khandoprastha into Indraprastha. And sometimes some people have a super simplistic idea of what spiritual life means. That, spiritual life means we should live in a village, on a farm, and have crops and take care of cows. Yes, that's one way to be spiritual. But there is, throughout history, there has been rural life and there has been urban life. Village life and city life. Now, Krishna lived in a village in Vrindavan. Krishna lived in a city in Mathura and Dwarka. And even in those times, converting a forest into a flourishing city was seen as a sign of progress. So this was seen, in fact, as the mercy of Krishna. And then the kingdom became so prosperous that even eminent citizens from Hastinapur started going there. That they started immigrating because they had better prospects, better support and all those things. Where people migrate from one country to another because there are some better prospects. So now, slowly, this started triggering the envy of Duryodhan. And when the actual gambling match when then the Rajasuya Yajna happened, that was the time Duryodhan's envy just exploded. Actually, it did not explode, it burned within. The explosion came later. So now here, see, we will talk about this principle in a later session if we get time. But I'll just make a quick point that for all of us, we have certain weaknesses inside us. We have certain anarthas. And it is important for us to protect ourselves from those anarthas. Like the other day I gave the example, if somebody is diabetic and they have weaknesses for sweet, then better they don't think I'll be sweet in charge. I'll be Mahaprasad in charge. We have to keep boundaries for ourselves. If somebody is a recovering alcoholic, then they should not keep alcohol in their home. They say, okay, it's not for me, it's only for my guests if they come and they want. I want to be a good host. Well, a guest will come and that guest will be your own alcoholism. Isn't it? So what happened? If you consider Duryodhan already had envy towards the Pandavas. And the three things that happened. First is that when he went to the Kaurava assembly, to the Indraprastha, he took the service of receiving gifts. Now Yudhishthir's intention was to try to make the Kauravas also feel included. That my prosperity is also your prosperity. It's like inside a family there might be rivalry, but if there is a wedding in the family, then what happens is everybody helps in the wedding and everybody takes different roles. So now there is no indication that Yudhishthir instructed Duryodhan to take that service. Now, how Duryodhan took that service, we could say that was unfortunately fate or destiny. Now that was the worst possible service he could have taken. Because what happened? He started saying, okay, it's one thing they have got a kingdom, but how much respect have they got? And what kind of gifts people are giving? So that he just could not bear. Or that put flame on his envy. And now we could say that receiving gifts, that service, this service which he took, that was fate. That was daiva, that was destiny. Maybe he didn't think carefully, maybe the Pandavas didn't think carefully. That was destiny. But then, after the Rajasuya Yagya got over, everybody left. Duryodhana said, I want to stay on. And I want to look at the Maya Sabha more and more. Now, see, if we have a new temple built and we are inaugurating the temple, we invite guests, then we will naturally have a guided tour of the temple for all the guests. There's nothing more for him to see. All the guests had been shown the Maya Sabha and he had also seen it. But he stayed on. And it's the worst possible thing to do. Where there is envy, then we stay on over there. Now his mood was not to learn about the Pandavas. It was something completely different. So he stayed on. And when he stayed on, this was completely on him. It was his karma, his choice. Present karma. The destiny means we can say it's past karma, but this was his present karma. Now not only did he stay on, then what happened was, he slipped and fell. We know that incident, that it is called Maya Sabha because there are lots of illusions in it. And at one place he thought it's normal land and he slipped and he fell. And now, actually in this incident, nobody comes out in the best possible light. So when he slipped and fell, everyone laughed. Now we may say, why do the Pandavas have to laugh like that? So normally if somebody slips and falls, we would immediately rush forward and try to help that person. We would empathize with that person. And normally, no cultured people would laugh at such a person. So what happened exactly over there? See, that's where the context needs to be understood. See, Duryodhan, he was when he saw the Maya Sabha, he felt such a great palace. See, it's like, okay, you did a Rajasuya Yagya, sacrifice, that is a one-time event. And you have done a sacrifice which I haven't done ever. Gifts, that is also you get one time. Of course, the gifts stay for a longer time. But the gifts are also, you get one time. But the palace is constantly there. And that you have a bigger palace than me, far grander palace than me, that was like a constant burning reminder for him. That the people who he had tried to destroy had become so much better than him. And then, so he was constantly trying to look as if he was not impressed by it. You know, like sometimes some things are so impressive, but you don't want to show that you are impressed. Okay, yeah, that's okay. You know, but now, so because of that, all that negativity that was there inside, he was snapping at the servants. He was putting on big airs, you know, acting as if he's a very big person. And now the Pandavas knew this was the same person who had tried to assassinate us. And it's one thing for Kshatriyas to fight and kill Kshatriyas. It should not happen among relatives, but even if it happens among relatives. But the fact that he had made a conspiracy in which even Kunti would have been killed. And Kunti had never done anything to harm Duryodhana. So, honorable Kshatriyas means, you know, women are not targeted. Not even honorable, it's a basic code of decency. So the thing was, the Pandavas, there was a whole history behind it. And see, sometimes somebody is acting as if they are far better than what they are. In the Bhagavad Gita, Dambho, Darpo, Abhimanascha. 3 distinct qualities are described of demoniac people. So, Dambha, Darpa and Abhiman, our Acharya described, what is the difference? They're all in the direction of pride and ego. But there's a difference. Dambha is where a person does not have some qualities, but they pretend qualities. It's like somebody is not very wealthy, but they are going for some wedding or some party. You know, they're from Amazon. They buy some very expensive clothes. They go for the party, act as if they're very wealthy, and then go and return the clothes after that. So, those who do not have the qualities, but they pretend to have the qualities, that is Dambha. Then Darpa is those who like to very much show off their qualities. They may have the qualities, but they like to show it off. And Abhimana is where they expect and insist that they be publicly honored for having those qualities or abilities, whatever it is. So, if I came to a particular place, you know, why was this not done? Why was that not done? And so, Abhiman is like they need a public show of respect is needed. So now, in this case, Duryodhan was exhibiting Dambha. Say, what happens if somebody is giving a class and thank you, and they are not very learned in scripture, but they act as if they are very learned. Like sometimes in India it happens that some people don't know English very well, but they know a few words and they speak those words and try to pretend they know English very well. And like that, somebody doesn't know scripture, but they pretend that they know it very well. And then if some question is asked which exposes their ignorance, then normally if somebody's ignorance is exposed, we won't laugh at them. But if somebody had been putting on a big show of how much I know, and then they are exposed, then the feeling serves you right. You know, you had it coming for yourself. So it is not the noblest moment of the Pandavas, but the point is that they laugh. So he fell and he was laughed at. Now we could say here it was his mistake plus the Pandavas' mistake. See, the Mahabharata is often giving a very realistic picture of life, where it describes that even the good characters may have some not so good moments, because life is difficult and sometimes life gets to us. So now this was unbearable for Duryodhana, and he just left in a huff, and he said, I have to destroy the Pandavas. They humiliated me, I am going to destroy them. And how did he decide to destroy? Shakuni came up with the idea of gambling match. And Shakuni was what we could today's world call a professional gamester. See, Shakuni was nowadays, video games are a big thing. And, in video games, sometimes for some people, those video games, how they play in the video games and what their status is, how many points they have, that becomes more important than the real life also. So it's like, it seemed, I met one devotee from Venezuela when I was in America, and he told me at one time the Venezuelan economy had tanked so much that it had become so bad that when they would go with currency notes, the shopkeepers would not count the notes, they would weigh the notes. And based on that, they would get some simple food to eat. That was horrendous mismanagement. Venezuela was called the Saudi of the South America. Saudi that had so much oil. It was horrendously mismanaged. But anyway, so he said at that time what happened, there was Venezuelans who learned to play video games, these popular video games, and they would play using the IDs of some people in America or Australia, and they would make points for them. So they would play, but these Americans would get the points and they would pay them in dollars. So at one time it happened that these Venezuelans, they would play for 12, 14 hours and they would earn more than cancer surgeons in Venezuela. Just play video games. So my point is that some people just are very good at, so there's no very good at particular things. There is no evidence that Shakuni ever ruled his kingdom. Most of the time he was with the Pandavas only. Sorry, Kauravas only, sorry. So anyway, so he said, you get Duryodhan, you get Yudhishthir here, and I will deal with him. I will get I'll get everything from him. So now the Duryodhan acted as if he was completely afflicted and he was devastated and crushed. He said, seeing the Pandavas' prosperity, my heart is completely broken. I don't feel like living. And Shakuni told him that they are rivals. He has been humiliated over here. He's feeling, you have to do something. So yes, he's my son. I'll do anything for him. So they both prepared the ground, and he said that, call the Pandavas for gambling. So Dhritarashtra was not naive. He was not ignorant, but he was attached, and that's why he was manipulable. So he said, let me talk with Vidura. And Vidura said, absolutely not. And if they gamble, they will fight. Don't do that. Now Dhritarashtra liked to listen to good advice. But that's all he liked to do. Listen, not act on it. So again, he told Duryodhan, Vidura is saying that we should not have this gambling match. He said, so is Vidura more important for you than me? Shakuni said, he's your son. Are you not concerned about his agony? And then Dhritarashtra collapsed. And then he had Vidura go to invite the Pandavas. Now when he invited the Pandavas, there's something that happened before this. After the Rajasuya Yajna, the guests had left, and at that time Yudhishthir came before Vyasadeva, who had been one of the priests presiding the whole Rajasuya ceremony. There were Ritvikas or Ritviks, as we say, those who were actually doing the ceremony, but Vyasadeva was like one of the presiding priests. So he told him that, O sage, thank you for your service, and thank you for ensuring that this whole sacrifice has happened so well. Please bless me so that I can rule and bring in peace and prosperity and spirituality among the citizens. And Vyasa became very grave. And he said, O king, in the future I see dark clouds of war. There will be a great war with immense destruction. And after that war, you will be able to rule with peace and prosperity. So at that time, Yudhishthira became thoughtful. He thought that, why does war happen? He came with his own reasoning. See, war happens because there are conflicts. And especially there are conflicts that are unresolved. But, Okay, let me put it this way. War happens because conflicts are unresolved. But war doesn't happen only because of this. Often there are conflicts, but why are conflicts not resolved? Because an authority is not accepted. Say, if two devotees have a conflict, they go to some senior devotee, or they go to some spiritual master, and ask, and spiritual master, let's do this, and both sides accept it. Or two people have a conflict, they go to the court, and the court makes a judgment, and both sides accept it. But if an authority is not accepted, conflict is mutually not resolved, authority is not accepted, then what happens is, when we feel there is no way to resolve this, then we fight. So he said, he understood Vyasadeva when he was saying what conflict would be between him and the Kauravas. So he said that, I will, in order to avoid conflict from happening, I will always obey my elders. So in this case, the elders would be the authorities, and I will obey my elders. Now, till this point, Dhritarashtra had never acted openly in a biased way. Although he had given him the barren half of the kingdom, but it was not like explicitly very biased. So now this resolve that Yudhishthira took, it was very well intentioned, that I will always obey my elders, and by obeying my elders I will avoid conflicts from happening. But unfortunately, something went disastrously wrong. See, one of the things is that good intentions are important, but good intentions are not a substitute for good intelligence. They're not the same thing. In life, we can have good intentions, but along with that, good intelligence is required. So now, Yudhishthira had good intentions. That's why when Vidura came, now for Yudhishthira, it was a double blow. It was one elder who was like a father figure, Vidura was from his father generation, conveying the message of another elder. That was Dhritarashtra. And his first thought was that, if we gamble, we'll fight. But because he had made this resolve, he agreed to go. And when they came to the gambling match, the first thing that Yudhishthira said, some people say that Yudhishthira became greedy or he was a gambling addict or something like that. That's not at all true. It was he had a particular reasoning why he was doing this. So first thing he said, "Oh Duryodhan, why do you want to steal the wealth that I am going to use to serve the Brahmanas and serve society?" And Duryodhan said, "Who is talking about stealing anything? We're just having some sports over here. So let's do that." And then came the secret. He said, "On my behalf, Shakuni will play." Yudhishthira immediately said, "That is against all the rules of gambling. If it is a game for sports, then the two players who are playing should play. Sometimes if there is a social event, there's a wedding or there's a party, two people may start playing some wrestling, two kids may play a wrestling match, or two people may play something. But suppose, one side gets a professional WWF wrestler or something like that. Then that's not fair." So then Duryodhan said, "If you are afraid, then you don't have to play." Now he was triggering Yudhishthira over here. Yudhishthira looked at Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra remained silent. And then as things started moving forward, as expected, Yudhishthira started losing. Once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times. And now Yudhishthira, what happened was that he kept thinking that I'm a virtuous person, that I'm a good person, I'm a dharmic person, and I have lost so much. If I just win once, then I'll be able to take care of my family, I'll take care of the kingdom, I'll take care of the Brahmanas. So he kept playing. He kept playing not because he was greedy to win, he kept playing because he thought that I'm a good person and at least once fate will benefit me, luck will benefit me. But the thing is that good intentions are not good enough in the world. You know why? Because the world is a harsh place, and particular activities require particular skills. Now somebody is not a surgeon and they say, I'll do surgery. I really care for this person, I really want to save this person. Well, if you don't know, you cannot do it. So Yudhishthir kept gambling. And as he kept gambling, he kept losing. He lost everything. He had no possessions left. And then he started putting his brothers on stake. And everybody was increasingly shocked as this was happening. He put Nakula, Sahadev, Nakula, then he put Arjuna, Bhima and himself. And he lost everything. And each time he was losing, the Kauravas were mocking him, jeering him, poking him. And finally, even when he was gambling, he was thinking that, Nakul and Sahadev is so virtuous. Arjuna is such a great devotee. Surely Arjuna will not be lost. I am a dharmic person. At least this one thing I will win. Draupadi is such a chaste woman. She is so virtuous. Surely she will not be lost. See, here there is a miscalculation. What is the miscalculation? That expertise in one field or greatness in one field does not mean greatness in another field. No, virtue itself does. Suppose somebody is attacking us with guns and we don't have any weapons. Can we say that we will be protected because we are good people? Well, no. It's like, suppose there is this game of bullfighting. You might have heard of this. They're matadors. So people get into a bull in a arena, like it's more like a pit or something, and then there's a wild bull that is coming, charging toward the person. Now some person who is not trained, that person is thrown into the bull pit. And that bull is charging toward that person. Hey bull, don't attack me, I am a vegetarian. Now being a vegetarian is a good thing, but that is not going to stop the bull from coming towards you. Isn't it? So the idea is that we cannot assume that just because we have virtue, we will be protected. Now we have to equip ourselves in the right ways. So there was this miscalculation. And then when he staked Draupadi, and he lost Draupadi at that time. So at that time, so it was first Karna who suggested, you still have Draupadi remaining. And then Karna suggested that drag Draupadi in over here. Drag Draupadi in and let us disrobe her. Let us treat her like any other maid, or worse than any other maid practically. So everybody was, it was like the shock was going worse and worse and worse. Now Vidura had tried to stop repeatedly, but nobody was hearing him. And finally Draupadi was dragged in. When she came in, sometimes in some renditions of the Mahabharata it is shown as if, as long as Draupadi was holding on to her cloth, Krishna didn't intervene. And when she let go, that's when Krishna intervened and protected her. Well, there's no such mention in the Mahabharata. Throughout, see, it was not that Draupadi was doing something wrong. She was trying to avoid adharma over there. And then when nothing was in her control, she raised her hands. But before that also, she was doing dharma only. So she's also, this was something so shocking. Any other woman would just collapse. How has this happened? How did my husband do something like that? How am I in this situation? But she was also Kshatrayani. Now, in fact, if you look at the whole incident, she is the most dishonored and she comes out to be the most honorable character in this whole incident. So she comes and she raises a question. She says, if Yudhishthir had already gambled himself, then if he was already a slave, then was he my master? If he is not, then how could he have gambled me? Now she raises this question and nobody answers. and she turns towards expectantly. She's still angry with her husband, especially Yudhishthira, what has he done? But at this point, she focuses on this point. Now Bhishma has been mortified by what is happening. But Bhishma says, oh Panchali, that even in such a time of adversity, you are remembering the principles of dharma and you are reminding others of dharma. This is indeed praiseworthy. At the same time, he said that there are two principles. That the wife is always under the care of the husband, and a slave does not own anything. So considering these two principles, I am confused. So now sometimes it says, is like the wife like a property of the husband? Well, it's not exactly like property at all. Because if you see what happened, Yudhishthir gambled all his property first. Then he gambled himself. And after that he gambled his wife. So it's more like a cherished, when people say, I am yours or you are mine. It's more a sense of that belonging is not like a possession, it is a belonging is the expression of love. So yes, the husband is meant to be the protector of the wife. So now Bhishma did not take any strong stand over here. Now at this point, Duryodhan tried to play a trick. And he said, oh Draupadi, if you declare that your husband Yudhishthir committed adharma by putting you on the gambling, by staking you for gambling, because he was not your master at that time. You acknowledge that Dharmaraj did adharma, and I will release you and I will return everything that you have been gambled and lost. So what he was trying to do, he was trying to play husband against wife. Now Draupadi was really angry with Yudhishthir, but she realized publicly, I am going to stand with my husband. So she said that right from the beginning, Yudhishthir never wanted to gamble this. He gambled only because he was pressured by his elders to do so. So those elders who asked him to gamble, let them decide about the ethics of how the gambling match went. Now, when nobody was speaking, Draupadi had presented this test to her. Was this right or wrong? So everybody remained silent. At that time, what happened? Vikarna spoke. Vikarna was one of the younger brothers of Duryodhan. And he said, oh assembly, when a person in distress comes and asks for justice, it is the duty of assembly to speak. And there are many elders over here, all of you please speak. Otherwise we will all be contaminated by sin over here. And nobody was speaking. There are many things, why were they not speaking? They were shocked and aghast. See, what is happening was so unbelievable, so unbelievably horrifying that nobody, what should we do? It's like, in psychology there is something called the bystander syndrome. That if somebody is being robbed, everybody thinks that somebody else will intervene. And everybody thinks somebody else will intervene, and because of that nobody intervenes. Now, if there's only one person over there, that person may go and help. But all the elders were there, all the courtiers were there. How is no one speaking? Now, of course, Duryodhana was also an evil person. But the point is that Vikarna said, if none of you are going to speak, I will speak. And he said that Yudhishthir didn't want to gamble. Still he was made to gamble by his elders. He was put against Shakuni. He was a professional gamester. And it is said that under the influence of intoxication, gambling or sexual infatuation, people lose their good sense. And what they do at that time should not be taken very seriously. Like say, if somebody is gambling, for example, and you come to know that they were drunk when they were gambling. They were not aware what stakes they are putting. They drank too much, then thus that gambling can be averted. There's some places there are rules like that. So he said, because he was goaded into gambling and he was constantly being goaded by Shakuni and others, I consider that this whole gambling match should be considered null and void. And when Vikarna spoke, one person spoke, everybody started applauding him. And this was the time when, that inevitable Kurukshetra war that would have happened eventually, this was a time when it could have stopped. Of course the wounds were very deep, but some healing could have been possible. But as everybody was applauding, at that time Karna stood up. And Karna, waving his arms, silence, silence. And then he said, I have observed many improper things in this assembly, but none is as improper as the words of this child Vikarna. He said, there are elders over here, they are not objecting. Why are you objecting? He said, Yudhishthira is an adult. He is a king. He is a responsible person. He chose to gamble. He chose to gamble against Shakuni. He chose to put Draupadi on the stake. I declare that she has been lost fairly. And Vikarna had said that an honorable woman like Draupadi should never be dishonored. And this is where Karna took a dirty, cheap shot. He said, now what is honorable about a woman who has 5 husbands? She is already like a prostitute. And if she is humiliated publicly, if she is dishonored, disrobed, what is the big deal? So, that's when Duryodhan called Dushasan, approached Dushasan. And he tried to disrobe her. Now, by Krishna's mercy, that vicious attempt was not successful. But despite all that, the scars of the wound were going to be very deep. Although Draupadi was saved, but nobody saw Krishna. Sometimes in movie retellings we may see Krishna smiling and with his hands sending a sari. But nobody saw what happened. They just saw that her robe seemed to be inexhaustible. And the disrober got exhausted, but the robe didn't get exhausted. And finally Dushasan collapsed. And then the people who were assembled started praising. Maybe because of Draupadi's chastity, she was mystically protected. And so brazen was the Kauravas' insolence that even when they saw this, they still did not think that there's some divine force which is protecting Draupadi and maybe we should not do this thing. Okay, if we cannot disrobe her, tell her to live in the maid's chambers and to clean the palace like the maids clean. And they gave her a broom to clean in front of everyone. Now, eventually things went on, the gambling match went on, and finally the Pandavas were exiled. So, they went. Now, here the condition was 12 plus 1 years. Here that Agyatva's condition was deliberately put because the Pandavas were like VIPs. Yudhishthira had been the emperor of the world. For somebody the emperor, it would be impossible for them to hide. And Bhima was an extremely powerful person, who was physically also well built. Impossible for them to hide. So the idea was that each time in Agyatvas we'll discover them and we'll send them to the forest and we'll keep them in the forest forever. Now the condition could have been made that now lifelong you will be in exile. Why 12 plus 1 years? Duryodhan was cruel. So the idea is that if we are put in a situation of hopelessness, that this is how it is, we will come to terms with it. But give somebody hope and then crush that hope. Give somebody hope and crush that hope. That will cause immense pain. So, this is what happened. Shringi could have cursed Parikshit to die immediately. Why gave him 7 days? He said, you are a powerful king. If an army is going to attack you, you will try to fight it. But here death is going to attack you, and you, such a powerful king, are powerless to stop death. So suffer in that sense of powerlessness. So it was to increase the suffering. So now we will discuss about what happened in the exile afterwards. But here let's come back to a few points. Now if you see, look at the characters. Duryodhan, what he did was horrible. But Duryodhan was, we can say, an evil person. He would do something terrible. Now Yudhishthir, what happened for him was, that he got carried away. He thought his good intentions will protect him. But good intentions alone are not good enough. And he learned this lesson later on. So in the Dharma Shastra itself, how do we know what is Dharma? When to focus on the content, when to focus on the intent, when to focus on the effect, and how to decide what is to be done. So I was giving this talk in America, and there were many young kids also attending the talk. So there was one boy, he came to me after the class. He was about teenager, and he said, "It's a great class. I learned something very important today." I said, "What?" "Obeying our elders is very dangerous." So that is not the lesson over here. The lesson is that not so much obeying the elders, it's like we cannot take, it's in this called Ekamulik Nyaya. Ekamulik Nyaya means take one factor and make it all important. Nyaya is logic. Ekamulik is, again, in sociology is called single factor analysis. Consider only one factor and don't think anything else. So in general, when we have to determine dharma, we have to look at the content, the intent, and the effect. All three need to be considered. So now with respect to the content, gambling, Yudhishthir had his reservations. If we gamble, we'll fight. But his intent was, let me obey my elders. And my intent is good, therefore I'll be protected. But, we'll be protected if those whom we are obeying are well-intentioned. If those whom we are obeying are ill-intentioned, that's why the metaphor breaks. We cannot believe that our parents or our elders are like Dhritarashtra. But the thing is, Dhritarashtra tried to use the same trick with Yudhishthir at the end of the exile. Now, during the exile, Yudhishthir prepared. While he was in the forest, he would discuss philosophy with the sages, but he also learned gambling over there. I say, gambling got you into trouble. Why do you want to learn gambling? But the idea is, he is preparing for that eventuality. If he's again challenged for gambling, he should be prepared for it. But more importantly, he recognized that we cannot just consider one factor. We have to consider all three factors. So when the exile ended, at that time, Dhritarashtra sent Sanjay as a messenger. And he said, "Oh, Yudhishthir, may Bhadramastu, may auspiciousness be for you. Ultimately, it's good that you have survived you are doing well after the exile. You are doing well in the forest. And that now that Abhimanyu is married to Uttara, he didn't go for that ceremony. He was blind, so for traveling it was very difficult for him. But he said, ultimately everything in this world is temporary. Everybody is a grahastha, has to become a vanaprastha. You are so fortunate that in your youth itself you are a vanaprastha. Why do you now want to become a grahastha? And for the sake of a temporary kingdom, why do you want to cause enormous bloodshed? Just be happy where you are." The idea was, don't ask for the kingdom. See, in English there is a word called rationalize. Any of you have heard this word rationalize? So rationalize means, say if a husband has promised his wife, "I'll stop smoking." And the wife comes to the room of the husband and there's smoke all around. Says, "Why are you smoking?" "Actually, I was not smoking. The room was very cold. I just wanted to make it warm for you." So when we rationalize, what do? We tell rational lies. So we try to use our intelligence to come up with more acceptable sounding reasons for less acceptable or unacceptable actions. This was what Dhritarashtra was doing. And Dhritarashtra had succeeded in pressuring Yudhishthir once, but not again. Yudhishthir said, he sent a message through Sanjay back. He said, "O king, when did I ever mention anything about a war?" He said, "It was in your presence, at your request, the gambling match happened. In your presence, some terms were agreed upon. We have honored our part. All that I am requesting you is to honor your part. And we are Kshatriyas, it is our dharma to rule. And we are still young, we have duty to our ancestors, we need to beget children and carry forward that dynasty. The citizens have given us so much, we have to take care, serve the citizens, and for that we need a kingdom. So he was very polite, but he was very firm. So the idea is that one value cannot be made in the absolute value. That was Yudhishthir, he learned from experience. Now if we consider Bhishma, see, Bhishma is a great character. So there is, I don't have time to go into this elaborately, but when I teach the epics, epics can be under the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavatam, they can be understood at 4 levels. One is a literal level. They're just dramatic stories and we enjoy the stories. So whenever there are movies or TV shows, they focus at this dramatic level. So here the focus is primarily entertainment. And it is a sattvic form of entertainment. Maybe it's better than watching Bollywood movies or stuff like that. Then they can be approached at the ethical level. Ethical level is where we get guide for decision making, what is right and what is wrong. And Srila Prabhupada uses this framework, for example, at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that, in the first chapter, he says that Arjuna is not just rushing into a war, he's thoughtful. He's thinking about what is the right thing to do. So a thoughtful person is actually qualified to receive the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. So here Prabhupada is taking ethical direction. So ethical level is, now for example, in the ethical level, our focus is not so much on who is right. That is focus, no doubt. But especially with great characters, our focus is on what is right, much more than who is right. So what does what is right mean? See, Srila Prabhupada in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita purport says that Arjuna is a thoughtful person and therefore he is capable of receiving the Bhagavad Gita. But in the next chapter, when Arjuna is crying, Prabhupada starts saying, these tears are a sign of ignorance and attachment and the skin disease, and everybody is attached in this way, and Krishna will speak the Bhagavad Gita to remove this ignorance of bodily conception of life. So is Arjuna a thoughtful person or an ignorant person? The point is that actually when we are studying the lives of great characters, we don't put ourselves in a superior position where we can judge this is right and this is wrong. See, we can try to learn what is right and wrong from their actions. So that's why Prabhupada sometimes takes both sides when he is teaching. The third is the allegorical level. Allegorical is where there is some symbolism. So Prabhupada, for example, says that when you surrender to Krishna, then you are giving the chariot, the reins of the chariot of your life and your body into Krishna's hand. And Krishna will always protect you. Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. So our body is like a chariot, and we as the Atma are like the passenger, and Krishna is the Paramatma, is the charioteer. It's allegorical level. Now, scripture itself is not allegorical. Scripture is historical, but allegorical is one level at which you can understand this. So Devaki's 6 children who were killed beforehand, they refer to the 6 anarthas, kama, krodha, lobha. The last is the devotional level. At devotional level, we see it all as a leela. So Prabhupada talks about this, for example, when he says that Arjuna's illusion was orchestrated by Krishna so that the Bhagavad Gita could be spoken. Then if Arjuna's illusion is orchestrated by Krishna, then Arjuna is neither right nor wrong, he is simply being used as an instrument. So the allegory, if we are analyzing at the devotional level, then the ethical level doesn't become relevant. If you look at the ethical level, then the devotional level is a different way of looking at it. That means everything is the Leela of the Lord, and within the Leela, different people are playing different roles. So, at one level, Yudhishthira is a pure devotee, and we cannot say he made a mistake. He was being a part of the Lord's Leela, and the Lord inspired him to act in particular ways. Similarly, we cannot say Bhishma made a wrong decision. He is a great devotee, he is a Mahabharata, a Mahajan. And whatever he did is a part of the Lord's plan. At the same time, this is the Bhagavatam's way of looking at it. This is not the Mahabharata's way of looking at it. Each book has a different focus. The Bhagavatam's focus is what? how to see Krishna in everything and surrender to Krishna. The Mahabharata's focus is how to deliberate and decide what is the right thing to do. So both ways are valuable and valid. So now, from a devotional perspective, Bhishma acted in the way he did so that Krishna's glory would be revealed. How Krishna came and protected Draupadi. How Krishna protected Arjuna when Arjuna was faced a great danger on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. How Krishna raised weapons to protect him. At the same time, if we say everything is the Leela of the Lord, then there is nothing for us to learn. Nothing for us to consider, okay, what decision did these characters make and how did they make these decisions? Why did they make these decisions? So we are focusing more on the ethical level. So at an ethical level, what happened was Bhishma succumbed to what we call as the Niyamagraha. Niyamagraha is sticking to the letter of the law at the cost of the spirit. So what are the letter of the law in that particular context? Okay, there's one principle is a woman is always under the care of her husband and a slave does not own anything. Well, whatever the technicality, a woman is being dishonored in public. That Kshatriyas, whatever be the specific rules, Kshatriyas are meant to protect 5 groups of people and one of them is women. So what happens is sometimes we may get so caught in the small rules that we forget the big picture. So in one sense, for Bhishma, it was that I have taken a vow that I will protect the ruler of the Kuru dynasty. And that vow became the supreme for him. So even if that person who is sitting on the throne is Dhritarashtra or is who is controlled by Duryodhan, even is a weak person or a wicked person, he was driven by that sense of morality. This is the right thing to do. So that context sensitivity that Bhishma does not exhibit. And that way he takes this wrong decision. Now of course, Bhishma is a very wise person, and at transcendental level, we understand that whatever he did was a part of the Lord's plan. But at the ethical level, how could he remain silent? We may ask. So it was not that he was simply weak or attached or powerless. It was, he was thinking that once you have chosen a particular side, you have to stick to that side. And I have taken a vow to protect the Kuru king, and that's whom I will stay with. Now he did express his opposition before the war happened, that he repeatedly tried to urge Duryodhan to stop fighting. In many ways, actually Bhishma never lost hope that Duryodhan would change. And he stayed on Duryodhan's side, hoping that Duryodhan would change. And that's why on the 10th day when he fell, everybody was shocked and everybody stopped fighting and came around. The first thing that Bhishma said when he fell was, "O Duryodhan, O prince, O child, just see, I who was undefeatable till now have been defeated. What I have told you, it is impossible to win against an army in which Krishna is on the other side. Please, with my fall, let the hostilities end. Talk with Yudhishthir and divide the kingdom and live peacefully." So that was the hope of Bhishma. So unfortunately, sometimes we may put a lot of hope in somebody changing, but that person does not change. So Bhishma was not weak. It was a particular moral evaluation that was misplaced. Now the last point we come to is Karna. I'll talk briefly and we'll talk about Karna later when we talk about the final war that will happen. But see, what happened to Karna was that, see, Duryodhan is here. Yesterday I was mentioning, Duryodhan had Karna as his friend, but Karna was subordinate to him because Duryodhan had given him everything. And Shakuni had become the father figure for Duryodhan because his father was very weak and Shakuni started giving him schemes. So now Karna had been trying to suggest many times, and let's challenge the Kauravas for us, Pandavas for a straight fight and we will win. I'll defeat them. I'll defeat Arjuna, you defeat Bhima. But Shakuni had rejected that idea. Now, suppose there is one leader and we give a particular suggestion, and that suggestion is repeatedly rejected. And then somebody else gives the opposite suggestion, and that suggestion is accepted. Then we may start feeling a little insecure. Do I really belong here? will I be valued or not? Not only that, now what had happened was Shakuni's scheme had become spectacularly successful. They had wanted to gamble and get the Pandavas' kingdom, but what they got was much, much more than what they expected. Everything from the Pandavas they had got. So it's like in that moment, Duryodhan had listened to Shakuni, and Shakuni's scheme had been enormously successful. So Karna felt that I also have to do something to please Duryodhan. And thus, what happened? He ended up doing horrendous things, suggesting that Draupadi be dragged into the assembly, suggesting that she be disrobed, calling her a prostitute, stopping Vikarna. He did all this to please Duryodhan. And thus, in this whole incident, nobody comes out in good light. Even the Pandavas don't come in good light. There are traditional South Indian Shiva Vaishnava commentators who say the Pandavas also were succumbed to adharma over here. Not just that Yudhishthira gambled, but when Draupadi was being dishonored, yes, there is Dasya Dharma, but there is also Pati Dharma. And they made Dasya Dharma so important that they completely neglected Pati Dharma. That you are a husband, you have to protect your wife. So everybody came out badly, but among everyone, Karna came out the worst. Because it's one thing for bad people to do bad things. Till this point, Karna had not really himself done anything extremely bad. But he did something horrendous. Now, to his credit, Karna regrets what he did. And twice later, when Krishna comes to meet him as Shanti Dut, and Bhishma, after Bhishma falls, Karna goes and meets him. Both the time he says, in trying to please Duryodhana, I went very far. He went very far. He acknowledges that he did wrong. But still, he does not give up Duryodhana, supporting Duryodhana. And that was his mistake. So, whenever wrongs are done, wrongs, anybody can do wrongs. Wrongs can fall in three categories. There is circumstantial wrong. That means largely it is done because of circumstances. Then there is intentional wrong, where a person wants to do the wrong and a person creates the circumstances. Now, how do we know when a wrong is in which category? Let's look at this. That primarily we need to see that is there regret after we do the wrong. Regret is more internal, and reform is more external. Do we really feel sorry after doing something? And then do we stop doing it? So if both are there, so if somebody has done something wrong, hurtful, so how should our response be? If it's circumstantial, then the regret will be there and reform will also be there. And in such situations, forget and forgive. Or rather, forgive and forget. Both. Don't hold it against them. Don't hold it against them at all. Now, when Kaikeyi did something terrible, Ram didn't hold it against her. Ram told specifically, Bharat, don't hold it against Kaikeyi. And when Ram met Dashrath, after Indra had come to see him after Ravan was killed, then he on behalf of Kaikeyi, he told Dashrath, please forgive her. And Dashrath said, yes, I'll forgive her. So, forget and forgive. It's a one-time thing. Now, if something is intentional, then there is no regret and there is no reform. So, Duryodhan, did he have any regret when he tried to disrobe Draupadi? Well, he had regret. Regret was his plan didn't succeed. So, not that I did something wrong. So, such people, they need to be punished. So, there has to be punishment over there. So, we could say, Yudhishthir, what he did, Yudhishthir's gambling was completely circumstantial. It was just completely unexpected circumstance he was put in. Duryodhan, it was totally intentional. Now, in between these two is one more category. Remember I talked about our choices are affected by conditions and conditionings. Hmm? So conditions refer to circumstances. Now in between we can say there is conditional. Conditional means I am not referring to based on conditions, I am referring to based on conditionings. There is no English word so conditioningal. So I am using the word conditional over here. But when somebody has a particular conditioning, then what happens? They feel regret, but there is still no reform. They say, I'm sorry, I will not do this again. Somebody has a very short temper, and in a short temper they speak something very, very terrible. They do something very hurtful. They attack somebody. They say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do this again. Never do this again, and they do the same thing again. Now they're not a bad person, but they keep doing bad things. So broadly, Karna falls in this category. Now in his case, his conditioning was that his excessive loyalty to Duryodhana. That was the only factor for Karna also, that I have given my word, I'll be with Duryodhana and I'll be there to Duryodhana all the time. Now here it depends on boundaries. Is that person ready to accept boundaries? And okay, like somebody is an alcoholic and they keep succumbing to alcoholism. They say, I'll not drink again, but they keep drinking again. Then at that time, should we think that they will give it up? Well, then they have to agree that, I will not keep alcohol anywhere, I will not go to any bar, even if there's a meeting and there's a party, maybe I'll not keep some easy cash with me, whatever. They have to accept some boundaries, because what happens sometimes, the conditionings may be very strong, and if they do not accept the boundaries, then they will keep succumbing to the conditionings. So Karna could have come here, but unfortunately he did not. Karna came on the side of Duryodhana, unfortunately. That's what happened when he rejected Krishna's peace proposal. So we will discuss this, eventually how things transpired, in a future session. But broadly speaking, that when we are trying to understand, today our topic was, when somebody is doing something right or wrong, how do we decide what is right or wrong? It is not very simple. So to decide right and wrong, today our focus was on the gambling match, and we focused on the theme of ethics. How do you know what is the ethical thing to do? What is the moral thing to do? So first point I discussed was the ICE framework. That we look at what are three things? Intent, content, and effect. So all these three need to be considered when we decide what is the right thing to do. And so ethics themselves can be in two categories, where some people, they only consider the categorical. Categorical means this is right and that is wrong, and whatever be the basis by which they decided, but that's all. But the other is contextual, that while there are right and wrong things, but we also have to consider context. Speaking truth is right, like honoring one's word is right, keeping one's vow is right, but we also have to consider what is the effect of it going to be. So then so we discussed about Yudhishthir Maharaj in the gambling match. What happened was it was his vow to obey elders that made him gamble. And what happened was wrong over here was, he was focusing on intent. My intent is good, I'm obeying elders. This was initially, but eventually he learned and he considered the whole picture. His vision became more holistic after the exile. So pre-exile, post-exile. Then we also discussed about Duryodhana. What happened? He already had envy, but then he triggered the envy further. First was his own, we could say destiny was that he took the service of the seva that he took of receiving gifts. Then it was his own choice. His karma was that he stayed on, and then it was both karma was that he fell and he was laughed at. He was mocked, or he felt humiliated. So how things work out, it's very difficult to figure out. Then we discussed about Bhishma, How Bhishma, what he did was, he was the niyama agraha, that the letter of the law became more important than the spirit. And that was, in one sense, a mistake. So when we use a word like mistake, we have to be very careful what we mean by that. At one level, these are exalted characters. So I discussed the framework called lead over here. That there is literal level, and what is the other level? Ethical level, allegorical, and then devotional. So if we are clear which level we are analyzing at, multiple things can be true at the same time. It can be the Lord's pastime, at the same time, it can be Lord's arrangement, at the same time, there is some ethical deliberation that has happened. And for us, learning, the ethical level is where learning happens. At the devotional level, it's mostly relishing. Oh, how wonderful are the pastimes of the Lord, and how wonderfully the Lord acts. So there are different purposes for different approaches. And the last part we discussed was that when some wrong is done, and how do we look at the wrong? That there is internal, is there regret? External, is there remorse? Sorry, reform. And then based on that, we also discussed what action should be done. So the wrong that is done, is it circumstantial? Is it intentional? So we discussed Yudhishthira was circumstantial, and there was regret, and there was reform. He did not listen to Dhritarashtra when he tried to manipulate him again, and he also learned gambling. With respect to Duryodhan, it was neither regret nor reform. He kept doing worse things, and therefore he needed to be punished. And conditional, in terms of coming from conditionings, that was karana. And what happened was, there was regret, but there was no reform. And from this, either a person can go up or go down. So we'll continue our discussion in tomorrow's session. I went a little over time today. We will have more time for question answers. Should we take one or two questions now, or should we take next time?
Yes, Prabhuji, we can.
One question, if anybody has. Yes, Kirtan.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, most of us, we were knowing this Mahabharata, what's happening, all the incidences. But understanding the theme behind it and what is the facts happening behind it, it's only now we can understand when we are being explained, so with all in detail analyzing. One point which Prabhu made is that we should not be judgmental in judging the characters. They are at a higher level.
Especially saintly characters.
Saintly characters, yes. So when we say like that, if we say that we cannot judge, then how do we learn, Prabhu, from their actions?
Yeah, that's why we have to be careful which approach, which level of approach we are taking. See, for example, Prabhupada, we could say when Prabhupada preached, it was all inspired by Paramatma. It was all inspired by Krishna. And that is true. But Prabhupada also used certain strategies. So when Prabhupada decided it was not working in India, he went to America. So that's a strategic choice. Now we can also decide that, from Prabhupada's example, if in one area service is not happening, I may shift to another area. So that doesn't mean that I am saying that I am at the level of Prabhupada. Of course not. And we understand that so purity is the force. That is true. But again, single factor analysis. Is purity the only force? Prabhupada was always pure, isn't it? Then why did the success not come in India? So the point is that at a devotional level, purity is the force, and it is Krishna's Leela, Krishna's plan. But there are practical factors to consider. See, one aspect is practicing Krishna consciousness is somewhat demanding. If a person is, if a country is very poor, if people are basically struggling for existence itself, then to chant 16 rounds and do serious sadhana is not very easy for people. So even when Prabhupada came back to India, not many people became devotees. Many became well-wishers, but not devotees. And Prabhupada accepted them. He created a life membership program for them. So the point is, we could look at Prabhupada's actions as transcendental, and that is true. But you can also look at Prabhupada's actions as strategic. And then what strategy he used when and what we can learn from it, that's something which you can also learn. So we should just not confuse the two levels. That when we are judging for learning, we should understand that this is real at one level, but this is not the only reality. Only reality means that Yudhishthira is such an irresponsible person that he gambled everything away. No, that is not the reality over there. So yes, that was a wrong decision, but even that wrong decision was by much deeper reasoning. He was not a gambling addict. So certainly we can learn. When I said we should not judge, I did not say we should not judge. Our focus should not be on judging the character. Our focus should be on judging the action. That there's a difference between judging the character and judging the action. The characters are themselves special, but particular actions that they have made, those may not be the right actions. And we can learn from there. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. That makes the sense. Judging the actions, not judging the characters.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the difference between making judgments and becoming judgmental. Judgmental means where you put the permanent label on the person. That is something which we want to definitely avoid. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
So thank you. So in tomorrow's session, we'll discuss about the exile, the Ajñatwas especially, and then we'll discuss about Krishna's peace mission. How things worked or how things didn't work. And in the last session, I'll talk about how the final battle, especially the battle between Karna and Arjuna or Bhima and Duryodhan, when good people have to do bad things. So tomorrow's session, see what we are doing is in terms of making choices for making decisions. So tomorrow we'll discuss what is God's role. How does God factor in? We are trying to decide what we want to do, but how does God factor in our decision making? What is God's role and how should we consider God's role when we are trying to make decisions? That's what we'll be discussing tomorrow. And finally, in the last session we'll discuss how sometimes good people may also have to do bad things. And when are such bad things acceptable and when are they not acceptable? That's what we'll discuss with respect to the actual battle of Kurukshetra. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Sri Mahabharata ki
Hare.
Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna. We thank all the devotees for attending today's program. We thank the preachers, Prabhuji, by chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra loudly. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Please be seated for a few minutes. There is some announcements and some facilitation also. Please be seated here only. Hare Krishna. This class will continue for tomorrow also. The life lessons from Mahabharata will continue. And day after tomorrow, there's a national holidays. There's morning class will be there by Prabhuji's. Tomorrow, day after tomorrow and Wednesday also. And there is philosophy of karma through Srimad Bhagavatam. A special class for children will be there on the 17th. The teenage groups above 13 years, please contact office or Vamshidhari Prabhuji for registering this for teenagers for the special class for the children. And we have now some calendars sponsors. The two names are there. Uttam Prabhuji. Those are two devotees who are sponsored for the calendars. Okay.
Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam to all the devotees. As you all know that we have started already launching our 2026 calendar. In this calendar, a particular family who has donated that huge amount of that